We crossed the state line at dusk. Connor was driving. It was his truck, his idea for this whole let's explore rural America road trip we'd been on for 3 days. I was navigating, which mostly meant watching the GPS die as we got deeper into areas where cell towers didn't exist. "Turn right in half a mile," I said, reading the last update before the signal dropped completely. Connor turned. The paved road became gravel, then dirt, then just 2 tire ruts cutting through dense forest. Trees pressed in on both sides, branches scraping the truck's sides like skeletal fingers testing for weakness. "This is definitely the road to the campground," Connor asked. I checked my phone. No service. The map showed a blue dot in the middle of green nothing. According to what I downloaded earlier, yeah, should be another 5 miles. We drove and drove. The road got narrower, darker. The sun was setting fast now, that twilight hour where everything gets sharp and strange. I started seeing shapes in the trees that looked like people, like animals, like nothing at all. Then Connor slowed down. "Do you see that?" I looked ahead, squinting into the gloom. Something was hanging from a tree branch about 20 feet up. Something metallic, catching the last of the light. "Probably just trash," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. We kept driving. Another tree, another hanging object. This time I could make it out clearly, a machete suspended from a rope, swaying slightly despite no wind. "Okay, that's weird," Connor muttered. Weird became horrifying in the next 100 yards. The trees were full of them, dozens, hundreds, knives of every size and description hanging from branches like a cutlery mobile. Machetes and kitchen knives and hunting blades and things I didn't have names for, all suspended at different heights, all turning slowly in place. And between them, other things. Doll parts, arms and legs and heads with their eyes gouged out, hanging from fishing line. They spun faster than the knives, their plastic smiles catching the dying light. Some were old, the kind of porcelain dolls your grandmother kept. Others were modern, Barbie and Ken stripped naked and dismembered. "Turn around," I said. "Turn around right now." But the road was too narrow. Connor tried to 3-point turn, but between the trees and the steep ditches on either side, there wasn't enough room. We'd have to keep going forward until we found a wider spot. So we drove deeper into the grove. The hanging objects got more numerous, more varied. Rusted chains joined the collection, their links welded together in patterns that might have been decorative or might have been something else. Scraps of fabric, clothes, flags, I couldn't tell, fluttered between the metal and plastic. And scattered throughout, objects I couldn't identify. Things wrapped in plastic, things that looked organic, things that might have been animal skulls or might have been something worse. The worst part wasn't what we could see, it was the sound. Every hanging object made noise. The knives clinked against each other like wind chimes. The dolls clacked as they spun. The chains rattled. Together they created a symphony of metallic and plastic notes that sounded almost like voices, almost like whispers. "This is someone's property," Connor said, his voice tight. "Someone did this deliberately." "Keep driving. What if they're still here?" "Connor, keep driving." The road curved, and the hanging things grew denser. Some branches were so loaded down they sagged under the weight. We had to duck our heads as we passed under one particularly low-hanging machete, its blade close enough to the windshield that I could see rust patterns that looked deliberately painted. Then I saw the first doll head with the fresh flowers in its eye sockets. "Someone's been here recently," I whispered. Connor didn't respond. He was focused on the road, which had become almost impossible to see in the gathering dark. Our headlights created weird shadows, making the hanging objects look like they were moving independently, reaching for us. That's when we both felt it. The sensation of being watched. Not a vague unease, not imagination, a specific, targeted feeling that someone or something was observing us from the trees, tracking our progress through their bizarre garden of horrors. I turned on the truck's high beams and immediately wished I hadn't. Deeper in the woods, just visible between the trunks, were more hanging things. But these weren't on branches, they were on posts, tall wooden posts driven into the ground, and from them hung objects so large, so complex, that I couldn't process what I was seeing. Frameworks made of welded metal, shapes that might have been cages, structures that looked almost like Are those gallows? Connor breathed. I didn't answer, couldn't answer, because movement caught my eye, a shadow shifting between the posts, too large to be a deer, too oddly shaped to be human. Drive, I screamed. Connor punched the gas. The truck fishtailed in the loose dirt, but he straightened it out, pushing 40, then 50, then 60 on a road that was barely a road. Branches screamed against the sides, hanging objects blurred past, a stream of metal and plastic and horror. We drove for what felt like an hour but was probably only 10 minutes. Finally, blessedly, the trees thinned. The hanging objects became sparse, then disappeared. We burst out of the woods onto a proper gravel road, and Connor didn't slow down until we hit pavement. We pulled into the first gas station we saw. 24-hour fluorescent lights, 2 other cars at the pumps, a clerk visible through the window reading a magazine. Normal, safe, real. We sat in the truck, engines running, hands shaking. What the hell was that? Connor finally asked. I pulled out my phone. Service had returned. I tried to mark the location, to screenshot it, to save evidence. But according to GPS, we'd never left the main road. Our route showed a straight line from the state border to this gas station. No detour, no forest road, no grove of hanging horrors. Check your odometer, I said. Connor looked. His face went pale. We should have used 30 miles of gas, maybe more with all that rough driving. And we used 4 miles. 4 miles, but we'd driven for at least 20. At least. We called the police anyway. Told them about the grove, the hanging objects, the sense of danger. The dispatcher was sympathetic but skeptical. She asked for a location. We had nothing to give her. The next day, in full sunlight and surrounded by other people, we tried to find the road again. Drove up and down the state line for 3 hours, never found it. That was 6 months ago. Connor sold his truck last month. Said he couldn't drive it anymore without thinking about those hanging things, without hearing that metallic symphony in his head. I understand, because I hear it too, sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep. The clinking of blades, the clacking of doll parts, the rattle of chains. And I wonder, was it a warning, a territory marker, some kind of ritual ground maintained by people who live so far from civilization that they've invented their own rules, their own rituals, their own gods? Or was it bait? We drove away. But what about the people who stopped? What about the curious ones who got out of their vehicles to investigate, to photograph, to touch? What happened to them? I don't know. And the truth is, I don't want to know. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some roads better left unexplored. And some groves are hanging gardens of human madness, and the only smart thing to do is drive past as fast as you can and pray they don't decide to add you to their collection. It was 11:47 p.m. when Jake noticed the GPS had stopped working. We'd been driving through southern Louisiana for 3 hours, taking what was supposed to be a shortcut back to New Orleans after spending the weekend at my cousin's place in Shreveport. The main highway had been backed up with construction, so Jake, always the one who thought he knew better than technology, decided to take the scenic route through the backroads. "This is fine," he kept saying, even as the paved road gave way to gravel, then to dirt. "My dad used to drive through here all the time." But that was 20 years ago. Things change. Roads disappear. And some places don't want to be found. The headlights cut through a darkness so complete it felt solid, like we were driving through black velvet. Spanish moss hung from cypress trees like the hair of drowned women, and every now and then I'd catch movement in the periphery, something darting between the trunks, always just out of clear sight. "Jake, I really think we should turn around." "We're almost through. I recognize that barn up ahead." I didn't see any barn, just more darkness, more trees. And then, houses. They materialized out of the night like they'd been photoshopped into reality. Shotgun shacks with peeling paint the color of old bones, windows covered with iron bars, yards choked with weeds that grew waist-high. Every single porch light was off. Not a single vehicle in any driveway. The whole neighborhood looked abandoned, forgotten by time and the living. That's when I saw them. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights, shadows shifting, maybe a deer crossing the road. But shadows don't stand in formation. Shadows don't have eyes that catch light like coins at the bottom of a dark well. "Jake, stop the trucks!" "What? Why?" Then he saw them too. 12 men, standing shoulder to shoulder across the narrow road, forming a human wall. They'd appeared so suddenly, so silently that my brain couldn't process where they'd come from. One second the road was empty, the next they were just there. Jake slammed on the brakes. The truck fishtailed slightly in the loose dirt, and for a terrifying second I thought we were going to plow right into them. We stopped maybe 15 feet away, close enough that our headlights illuminated their faces. They weren't old. They weren't young. They were ageless in that way people get when life grinds them down to pure, hard essence. Worn jeans, flannel shirts or wife beaters, work boots caked in mud. But it was their faces that made my throat close up. Expressionless, not angry, not threatening, just blank. Like someone had wiped away every emotion and left only purpose. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a living barricade, staring at us through the windshield with eyes that reflected red in our taillights. "What do we do?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Jake, what do we do?" Jake's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I could hear him breathing, fast and shallow, like he'd just finished a sprint. In the back seat, Marcus had gone completely silent. I'd forgotten he was even there until I heard him whisper a prayer in Spanish. Seconds crawled by. 10, 20, 30. The men didn't blink, didn't shift their weight. It was like looking at a photograph, except photographs don't breathe in sync, don't have chests that rise and fall with unified rhythm. "I'm going through," Jake said finally. "You can't. I'm going through." His voice was steady now, but I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. "They'll move. They have to move." He pressed down on the accelerator, slowly at first, then faster. The truck lurched forward, eating up the 15 feet between us and them in seconds. I braced for impact, certain we were about to commit vehicular manslaughter, certain I'd hear the sickening thud of bodies against metal. But they moved. Not panicked, not scrambling, just a smooth, coordinated parting, like a door opening, like they'd practiced this exact movement 1,000 times. 6 men stepped left, 6 stepped right, creating a space just barely wide enough for the truck to pass through. As we drove between them, I made the mistake of looking. They were so close I could have reached out and touched them, close enough to smell sweat and earth and something else, something acrid like burnt hair. Their eyes tracked us as we passed, heads swiveling in perfect unison, 12 pairs of eyes following the truck like we were prey they'd decided to release. But one of them smiled. Just one. The man on the far left, second from the end, his lips curled up at the corners, revealing teeth that were too white, too perfect. And in that smile was a promise. Not a threat, a promise. "We see you. We know you. And if you ever come back..." We didn't dare look in the rearview mirror until we'd put a mile between us and them. When we finally did, the road behind us was empty, just darkness and trees and that oppressive Louisiana night. None of us spoke for the next hour. When we finally hit the highway, when civilization wrapped around us like a blanket, Marcus said he needed to pee. We pulled into a gas station, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying insects. As Jake pumped gas and Marcus disappeared into the bathroom, I sat in the passenger seat, still shaking. My phone had service again. I pulled up Google Maps, zoomed in on where we'd been. There was no road, just green forest, unbroken for miles. I zoomed in further. Nothing. "That's impossible," I whispered. Jake climbed back into the driver's seat, saw what I was looking at. "Maybe the map's out of date." "Google Maps updates satellite imagery every few months. This shows nothing but trees." We stared at the screen together, at the place we'd just driven through, the place that, according to every digital map in existence, didn't exist. Marcus came back with 3 energy drinks and a bag of Takis. "We never talk about this," he said, handing them out. "Whatever the hell that was, we never mention it again. Not to our families, not to each other. It didn't happen." I wanted to argue, wanted to file a police report, wanted to do something. But what would I say? We drove through a neighborhood that doesn't exist and were blocked by men who moved like they shared one brain. So we agreed. We drove the rest of the way in silence, parted ways at my apartment, and I went inside and locked every door and window. That was 3 years ago. I still think about them sometimes, about those 12 men standing in perfect formation, about how they moved as one, about that smile. And I wonder, are they still there, standing guard on a road that doesn't exist, waiting for the next lost travelers who take the wrong turn? Or do they only appear when needed, materializing out of the Louisiana darkness to remind people like us that some shortcuts aren't worth taking? Some places have rules we don't understand. Some communities have secrets they guard with more than just words. And some roads are one way, even when you make it out alive. I've never driven through Louisiana since, and I never will again. Because deep down, I know the truth. We weren't let go. We were let through. There's a difference. And if I ever see those back roads again, I have a sinking feeling they won't open for me a second time. We found the dirt road purely by accident. 3 of us on motorcycles, cutting through mountain valleys in Colorado on our way to a rally in Denver. James was on his Harley, Sarah on her Indian, and me on a Triumph that I'd spent 2 years rebuilding in my garage. The plan had been simple: take the scenic route, camp under the stars, arrive fashionably late with stories of adventure. We'd been riding for hours when James's bike started making a noise, a grinding, metal-on-metal sound that made us all wince. We pulled over and he popped the hood, diagnosed the problem loose chain and fixed it in 15 minutes. But during that stop, Sarah spotted the road. Look at that! It was barely visible through the overgrowth, a dirt path cutting between 2 massive pines leading deeper into the valley. No sign, no marker, just a road that looked like it had been forgotten by time. "Wonder where it goes," James said, wiping grease off his hands. I should have said no, should have insisted we stick to the plan. But there's something about being on a bike, about the freedom of the open road, that makes you stupid, makes you think every path is an adventure waiting to happen. "Let's find out," I said. The road was rough, rougher than any road should be if it's still being used. Branches scraped our helmets, and more than once I had to navigate around fallen logs that had been there so long they'd started decomposing into the earth. We rode for maybe 20 minutes, going deeper into the mountains, the path getting narrower and darker. Then the trees opened up, and we saw it. A town. Not ruins, a town. Intact buildings with walls and roofs, though many were boarded up. A main street with stores that still had signs hanging: Johnson's General Store, Pete's Bar, Mountain View Pharmacy. Cars, ancient ones, 50s models, sat rusting in parking spaces, their tires long since rotted away. But it was the sculptures that made us stop. They were everywhere. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Twisted figures made from scrap metal, welded together in shapes that hurt to look at. Animals with too many legs, humans with elongated limbs and heads bent at impossible angles. Things that weren't quite either, abominations of jagged edges and hollow eyes. "What the hell is this?" Sarah's voice crackled through our helmet radios. We killed our engines and climbed off the bikes. The silence was immediate and total. No birds, no insects, no wind, just the faint creaking of metal on metal as one of the sculptures shifted slightly on its base. I walked up to the nearest one, a dog, I thought, or maybe a wolf. It was made from car parts, fenders for ribs, a bumper for the spine, headlights for eyes. Those eyes, despite being nothing but glass and rust, seemed to track me as I circled it. "This is someone's art project," James said, but his voice lacked conviction. Has to be. Creepy art project, Sarah murmured. We wandered down the main street, peering into dusty windows. Some stores still had merchandise on the shelves, cans so old their labels had faded to white, boxes that crumbled when I tapped the glass. In the pharmacy, I could see a calendar on the wall, October 1952. This place has been empty for over 70 years, I said. Then who made the sculptures? Sarah asked. Good question. Because the sculptures didn't look 70 years old. The metal was rusted, yes, but the welds looked newer. Some of them were made from modern car parts. I recognized a Honda logo on one, a Tesla emblem on another. We made our way to the center of town, where a fountain sat dry and filled with dead leaves. More sculptures surrounded it. These were bigger, more elaborate, and more disturbing. They formed a circle, all facing inward, like they were attending some kind of meeting or preparing for some kind of ritual. I don't like this, Sarah said. We should go. I agreed. We all did. But as we turned to head back to our bikes, we heard it. An engine. Not a motorcycle, something heavier. The sound came from the far end of town, from a street we hadn't explored yet. We stood frozen, listening as it grew louder, closer. Then it appeared through the fog that had started rolling in, because of course there was fog now, even though there hadn't been 10 minutes ago. A tractor. Old John Deere, green paint flaking off in sheets. But it was what was mounted on the front that made my blood freeze. A deer's head. Severed, decayed, but somehow still intact. Its antlers were wrapped in chains, rusty chains that dragged behind the tractor, scraping against the cracked pavement with a sound like grinding teeth. And there was no driver. The tractor trundled forward on its own, engine chugging, belching black smoke. It turned onto the main street, heading straight toward us. Go, James hissed. Go, go, go! We ran. Later, I'd be embarrassed about it. 3 experienced riders, scared off by a driverless tractor. But in that moment, with that deer's head swaying as the tractor bounced over potholes, with those chains scraping and that engine growling, in that moment, running was the only thing that made sense. We got to our bikes, kick-started them with hands that shook so badly I nearly dropped mine. The engines roared to life, beautiful and loud and real. We didn't look back as we raced down that dirt road, branches whipping at us, rocks spitting out from under our tires. We didn't stop until we hit the main highway, until we were surrounded by normal traffic and normal people and normal reality. Only then did we pull over, strip off our helmets, and try to process what we'd seen. Did that really just happen? Sarah's face was pale. The tractor, James said. There had to be a driver, we just couldn't see them from where we were standing. And the sculptures? Art installation. Like I said, some eccentric artist bought a ghost town and turned it into an outdoor gallery. I wanted to believe him, wanted it to be that simple, but when I pulled out my phone to mark the location, to look it up later, I found nothing. No road, no town, just green forest unbroken for miles. That's impossible, I said, showing them. We compared our GPS histories. All 3 showed the same thing, a straight path from where we'd started to where we were now. No detour, no dirt road, no ghost town. We all saw it, Sarah said. All 3 of us. That makes it real. But did it? Because when we tried to find it again, and we did try, drove back to the spot where we'd turned off, there was no road. Just trees, thick and old and undisturbed. That was 2 years ago. I still ride, still take back roads, but I never explore anymore. Never follow unmarked paths into valleys that seem too quiet, too still. Because I know the truth now. Some towns exist outside the normal flow of things. Some places are pocket dimensions, bubbles of wrongness that occasionally intersect with our world. And some art isn't made by human hands. It's made by whatever lurks in those forgotten places. And it's watching, waiting, for the next riders foolish enough to wander off the beaten path. The gas gauge had been on empty for 5 miles when I finally saw the sign. Population 217. I didn't catch the town's name. The wooden marker was so weathered that the letters had faded into ghost impressions, barely distinguishable from the grain. But I didn't care about the name. I cared about the gas station that appeared half a mile later, sitting at the intersection of the only 2 roads this forgotten place had to offer. It was the kind of building that made you think of black and white photographs. Single pump, corrugated metal roof sagging in the middle, windows so filthy they looked frosted. I pulled up, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, listening to the tick, tick, tick of cooling metal. That's when I saw the child. Pale, bald, maybe 7 years old, maybe 70, it was impossible to tell. They stood at the window, hands pressed against the glass, staring at me with eyes too large for their face, not blinking, not moving, just staring. I raised my hand in a small wave, trying for friendly. The child's mouth opened in a silent scream, and they disappeared from the window so fast it was like someone had yanked them backwards by an invisible rope. My hand was still raised when the engine of my rational mind started sputtering. This is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. But I needed gas, and the next town was God knows how many miles away on fumes I didn't have. The pump was ancient, the kind where you had to go inside and prepay. I walked to the door, pushed it open, heard a bell jingle, a cheerful sound that felt obscene in the heavy silence. The store was empty. Shelves stocked with dusty cans that looked like they'd been there since the Reagan administration, a register that was probably older than me, and no one, not the child, not anyone. I waited 30 seconds, cleared my throat, called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I left $20 on the counter and went back outside to pump. The fuel was slow, the numbers on the ancient display rolling over with arthritic reluctance. As I waited, I looked around. The whole town felt like a stage set. Houses that should have had people in them but didn't, a church with a crooked steeple and no cars in its lot, a park with swings that moved in the breezeless air, and the diner. Pat's Diner, according to the neon sign that buzzed and flickered despite it being 2 in the afternoon. It sat on the opposite corner, a chrome-sided relic that belonged in a different decade. Through the windows I could see people. Lots of people. My stomach growled. I'd been driving for 6 hours on nothing but gas station coffee and adrenaline. The pump clicked off 12 gallons, which meant the gauge had been lying about how empty I really was. I screwed the cap back on and looked at the diner again. Packed. Every booth filled, people at the counter, the kind of crowd you'd expect on Sunday after church, not Tuesday at 2 p.m. I should have gotten back in my car, should have driven away and never looked back. But hunger has a way of overriding instinct, and besides, lots of people meant normal, right? You don't get a bustling diner in a town full of monsters. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and every single person stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths, conversations died mid-syllable, coffee cups paused in mid-sip. 50-plus people, all turning to look at me with the kind of coordinated precision you only see in rehearsed performances. The silence was so complete I could hear the hum of the ancient air conditioner, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, the thud of my own heartbeat. No one smiled, no one frowned, they just stared. Farmers in overalls, families with children, old men in suspenders, all frozen, all watching, all waiting. I tried to smile. "Hi, I'm just..." "What do you want here?" The voice came from my right. I turned and saw her. She sat at the counter, coffee cup in front of her, wearing 2 eye patches over where her eyes should have been. Not 1, 2. One over each socket, like someone had very carefully decided to cover the absence where sight should have lived. She was old, ancient maybe, skin like crumpled paper, hair white as bone, back bent into a question mark. But it was her voice that made my bladder clench, raspy and wet, like words being dragged up from underwater, from somewhere voices shouldn't be able to come from. I just wanted to get some lunch." She turned her head toward me with mechanical precision. Without eyes, I shouldn't have been able to tell she was looking at me, but I could feel it. The weight of that eyeless gaze, boring into me like augers. "We don't serve your kind here." "My kind?" I almost laughed, almost asked what kind that was, the hungry kind, the lost kind. But something in the quality of the silence stopped me. Because everyone was still staring, and now I noticed details I'd missed. The way some people's mouths were hanging open just slightly. The way that little girl in the corner booth had stopped crying mid-sob, tears frozen on her cheeks. The way the cook behind the counter had a spatula raised like he was about to flip something, but nothing was on the grill. They weren't eating. They were pretending to eat. This whole scene, it was a performance, a trap. "I'll just go," I said, backing toward the door. "You'll just go," the eyeless woman repeated, and her lips curled into something that might have been a smile if smiles were supposed to have that many teeth. "That's what they all say, before, after." She tilted her head and I heard her neck crack like old wood. After, they usually scream. The diner erupted into motion. Everyone stood at once, chairs scraping back in perfect unison. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard amplified through a megaphone. They didn't rush at me. That would have been almost better. Instead, they just stood there, blocking every aisle, every path to the door except the one I'd come through. I ran, hit the door so hard the glass rattled, sprinted across the street to my car, fumbled with the keys, dropped them, picked them up, got the door open, got inside, locked it, started the engine, all while watching the diner through the windshield. They stood at the windows, all of them, pressed against the glass like the child at the gas station had been, watching me with expressions that ranged from hunger to curiosity to something I couldn't name. The eyeless woman was in the center, her head tracking my movement despite her lack of sight. I threw the car into reverse, then drive, then I was racing down the two-lane highway, putting miles between me and that place. I didn't slow down until my hands stopped shaking, until the town was 30 minutes behind me. When I finally pulled over at a real rest stop, one with multiple cars and families and normal people doing normal things, I grabbed my phone to mark the location, to warn others, to do something. But when I looked at the GPS history, there was just a straight line. No detours, no stops, just the highway uninterrupted. That town with a population of 217, according to my phone, it had never existed. I drove the rest of the way home with my doors locked and my windows up despite the heat, and every time I pass through a small town now, I don't stop. I don't look at the diners, no matter how inviting they seem. I don't wave at children in windows. Because I learned something that day. Some places exist between the cracks of maps. Some populations aren't listed because they don't want to be found. And some diners don't serve food. They serve something else entirely. And if you're unlucky enough to walk through their door, well, you might just become what's on the menu. The fight started somewhere in Missouri. One of those stupid married couple arguments that snowballs from nothing. I said something about stopping for gas. Kelly said we had enough to make it to the next town. I insisted. She got defensive. And before you know it, we weren't talking about gas anymore. We were talking about every grievance we'd been hoarding for 6 months. The real problem wasn't gas. It was the job offer in Seattle. The one I'd turned down without consulting her. The one that would have doubled my salary but meant leaving her family, her friends, her whole support system. We'd been over it 100 times, but apparently we weren't done yet. By the time we crossed into Kansas, we were on hour 3 of furious silence. I saw the exit purely out of spite. Topeka, 15 miles, the sign said, with a smaller sign underneath indicating a state route that cut south. I didn't consult Kelly, didn't discuss, just took the exit, because I wanted to be right about something, even if that something was just choosing our route. The highway gave way to a 2-lane road, then to something barely paved. Houses started appearing, small, weathered, the kind of rural poverty that makes you uncomfortable because there's nothing you can do about it. Yards full of broken appliances, dogs on chains that barked as we passed. We drove through a crossroads that might have been a town once, but was now just 4 buildings huddled together like they were afraid of the empty fields around them. "This isn't Topeka," Kelly said, her first words in an hour. "I know." "Then where?" "I don't know, Kelly. I'm figuring it out." We should have turned around, should have swallowed our pride, admitted the mistake, found our way back to the highway. But pride is a hell of a drug, and I was already 3 exits deep into my stupid decision. So I kept driving, telling myself the next intersection would have a sign, would point us back to civilization. Instead, we found the town. If you could call it that. A dozen houses arranged in a perfect grid, like someone had laid them out with a ruler and a textbook on urban planning. Most were single-story, with aluminum siding that had aged to the color of old teeth. A few had yards with rusted swing sets that hadn't moved in years, weeds growing up through the seats. One had a barn that had burned down, recently based on the char marks still black against the wood, the smell of smoke still faint in the air. And every single house felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on why at first. They looked normal enough. Mailboxes at the curbs, street numbers painted on the foundations, the kind of place that should have been forgettable, just another dying rural hamlet bleeding population to cities and suburbs. But there was something in the air, a thickness, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. I slowed down without thinking about it, cruising at maybe 15 miles per hour down what passed for the main street. My hands were tight on the wheel, white-knuckled even though nothing had happened yet. In the passenger seat, Kelly had stopped looking at her phone and was staring at the houses. "There's no one here," she whispered. She was right. No cars in driveways, no lights in windows even though it was past 6 and the sun was starting to set. No smoke from chimneys despite it being late October and cold enough that I could see our breath when we'd gotten gas an hour ago. No movement anywhere. Just stillness. Complete and total stillness. "Ghost town," I said, trying to sound casual. "We'll go through and circle back to..." That's when the first door slammed. We both jumped. I actually hit the brake, the car jerking to a stop hard enough that Kelly's seatbelt locked. The sound had come from our left, a house with faded yellow siding and a front porch that sagged like a broken back. The door was closed now, but had it been open before? I couldn't remember. I hadn't been paying attention. Then another door slammed, house 2 down from the first. Then another. Then another. 5 houses in quick succession, bang, 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 like dominoes falling. Each one closing, shutting, locking out or locking in, I couldn't tell which. The sounds echoed through the empty street, bouncing off the houses, multiplying until it sounded like a dozen doors, 2 dozen, all slamming in unison. "Drive," Kelly said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "Drive. Now." I didn't argue. I hit the gas, probably harder than I should have. We lurched forward, tires squealing slightly on the cracked pavement. The car felt sluggish, like we were driving through water instead of air. But as we passed each house, I made the mistake of looking. The curtains were moving. Not from wind. All the windows were closed, I could see that clearly. But behind them, shadows shifted. And faces. Pale, indistinct at first, but definitely faces pressed against the glass, watching us drive past. "Don't look," Kelly hissed. But she was looking too. We both were. We couldn't help it. Because the faces weren't just watching. They were afraid. At the third house, I saw an old man, his face so close to the glass his breath would have fogged it if he was real. His eyes were wide, white showing all around. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Warning us? Calling for help? At the fourth house, a young woman in what looked like a nightgown from the 1950s. Her hands were pressed flat against the window, fingers splayed, and there was something dark on her palms. Dirt. Or blood. At the fifth house, children. 3 of them, different heights, pressed together like they were huddling for warmth. The smallest one was crying. I could see tears on their cheeks even from the car. "Don't look," Kelly said again, and this time her voice broke. But I couldn't stop looking. Because at the last house before the road curved back toward the fields, I saw them clearly. The family I'd glimpsed earlier, a woman and 2 children, standing at the window, not moving, not waving, just watching. Their eyes were wide, too wide, like someone had held their eyelids open and forced them to stare. Their mouths were open like they were screaming, except no sound came out, not even when I could see their throats working, see the tendons in their necks standing out with the effort. And their hands, all 6 hands flat against the window, fingers splayed, but now I could see what the woman had on her palms. Words, written in something dark, backwards so we could read them from outside. Then we were past the houses, back into open fields, and I floored it. The car shuddered with the speed, straining against whatever invisible force had been holding it back. But I didn't care. I kept my foot down until we hit a 4-way stop 10 miles later, until I saw a gas station that actually had cars at the pumps, other people, real people pumping gas and checking their phones and doing normal things, until reality wrapped back around us like a security blanket. We pulled in, parked, sat there with the engine running. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Kelly's hand found mine. Not romantic, just desperate. 2 people who'd just seen something they couldn't explain, needing to confirm the other person was still there, still real. What the hell was that? Her voice shook. I don't know. Those people, they were trying to warn us. Did you see what she wrote? On her hands? I saw. So what were they warning us about? The town, or something in the town? I had no answer. Still don't. We called the police from that gas station, told them we'd seen something weird, people who looked like they needed help in a town south of Topeka. The dispatcher was kind but confused. She asked for specifics, a town name, a road number, a landmark, anything to help her send someone. We had nothing. Just south of Topeka, off exit 47, maybe 10 miles down a state routes. When she checked, there was no exit 47. The next exit after where we'd gotten on was 52, and it was 20 miles north, not south. When we pulled up GPS on Kelly's phone, it showed us on Route 75, which didn't have any exits for 30 miles in either direction. Maybe we were confused, I said, but even I didn't believe it. Maybe it was 57 or... We weren't confused. Kelly grabbed my phone, started scrolling through maps, zooming in and out, trying to find any evidence of where we'd been. It was here. Right here. I know it was. But there was nothing. Just fields and farmland, uninterrupted for miles. No roads, no towns, no grid of houses with terrified people at the windows. We drove home in silence. A different kind than before. Not angry. Afraid. The kind of afraid where you keep checking your mirrors, where every car that follows you for more than a mile makes your heart race, where you're grateful for streetlights and traffic and all the mundane normalcy of civilization. That night, I dreamed of those faces. The way they pressed against the glass, the way their mouths formed words I couldn't hear. And in the dream, I understood what they were saying. Get out. Get out while you can. It's coming. It's always coming. But what was coming? And were they trapped there, forced to watch it arrive again and again? Or were we the ones who'd almost been trapped, saved only by the grace of not stopping, not getting out of the car? When I woke up, Kelly was already awake, sitting by the window, staring out at our normal suburban street. I keep thinking about them, she said without looking at me. What if they're still there? What if they're always there, waiting for someone to stop, to help? We can't go back. I know. She turned to me finally, and her eyes were red. But what if that's what they want? What if the whole thing is a trap, and they're the bait? I had no answer. Still don't. 4 years later, Kelly and I are divorced. Not because of the town. We never fought about that, never disagreed on what we saw. No, we split because once you've seen something that impossible together, once you've witnessed the fundamental wrongness of reality, every normal problem seems both trivial and insurmountable. How do you fight about whose turn it is to do dishes when you've both seen people trapped behind glass, mouths forming warnings you can't hear? How do you worry about money, or careers, or where to spend Christmas when you know there are places that exist and don't exist, that catch travelers and keep them as window decorations? I avoid Kansas now, avoid backroads in general, prefer interstates where everything is mapped and monitored and makes sense. I avoid any small town that feels too quiet, too perfect, too arranged, because I learned something that day that I can't unlearn. Some places aren't on maps because they don't want to be found. Some communities aren't hiding from the world, they're hiding from something else, something that comes for them again and again, something that makes them stand at windows and watch and warn. And whatever they're watching for, whatever made them write "run" on their palms in something dark, I pray I never find out what it is. I pray it stays in that impossible town, in those watching windows, in that place that shouldn't exist. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's already found me. Thank you for making it to the end. If you loved listening to the stories, please like and subscribe for stories like these every week, shared by real people. Comment below to let me know which story disturbed you the most. Thanks again for supporting the channel.